The evidence box was sealed, labeled, logged, initialed, and then forgotten. For nearly 2 decades, it sat in storage, moved from shelf to shelf, room to room, building to building. No one opened it, because everyone believed the case was already solved. But when the box was finally unsealed, it didn't confirm the verdict. It quietly began to destroy it. Evidence is supposed to be permanent. Facts don't change. Only our interpretations do. That's what we're told. But what happens when evidence disappears? When it's mishandled, logged incorrectly, and rediscovered years later? This is the story of a case that rested on evidence no one could find until it reappeared, long after 3 lives were already sentenced. Welcome to West Memphis, Arkansas's 1993. It's a small town suffering through a hot summer filled with deep religious tension and a growing fear of the unfamiliar. On May 5th, 3 8-year-old boys were reported missing. By the next day, their bodies were found in a drainage ditch. They were naked, bound, and submerged. The community was horrified and demanded answers. Fast ones. The police immediately started collecting evidence. They gathered shoelaces, clothing fibers, ligatures, a knife, hair samples, and blood evidence. Everything was logged, at least on paper. But even in those early days, the reports showed major inconsistencies. Items were described differently in separate logs. Chain of custody forms conflicted with each other. Evidence bags were found unsealed and then resealed. But the case moved forward anyway. Fear doesn't wait for precision. And then, the evidence started disappearing. Some items were never presented in court. Others were described but never physically shown to the jury. A crucial ligature knot went missing. The origin of the knife was disputed. Blood samples were stored so improperly they became useless for testing. When defense attorneys asked to examine these items, they were told the evidence was unavailable, lost, destroyed, or simply untraceable. No one could explain when or how it had vanished. With the physical evidence weakened or gone, the prosecution's case leaned heavily on other things. A coerced confession from a teenager with a low IQ questionable witness testimony, and a wave of moral panic sweeping through the town. 3 local teenagers known for their interest in heavy metal and black clothing became the perfect scapegoats. They were convicted. One was sentenced to death. The other 2 were given life in prison. The evidence boxes stayed closed. The town moved on, believing justice had been served. But evidence doesn't always disappear quietly. Sometimes it just waits. Years later, advances in DNA testing changed everything. The defense teams, still fighting for the convicted men, requested a re-examination of all existing evidence. And suddenly, items once believed destroyed were found. Hair samples, fibers, biological material, all logged, misplaced, but still existing, hidden away in a forgotten box. That box was finally opened, and the story changed. The new DNA testing revealed something chilling. None of the recovered biological evidence matched the 3 men who had spent nearly 2 decades in prison. Not a single piece. Instead, fibers found at the scene were linked to someone else entirely. A hair sample was found to be consistent with the stepfather of one of the victims. There was simply no forensic tie to the defendants. The evidence that had been ignored for so long was now speaking clearly, but by then the system had already chosen its truth. The courts didn't admit innocence. They didn't overturn the convictions. Instead, they offered a controversial legal tool known as an Alford plea. This allowed the men to be set free while still technically maintaining their guilt in the eyes of the law. It was freedom without exoneration. The new evidence was acknowledged, but never fully accepted by the justice system. The box was resealed, and the case was officially resolved. Evidence is supposed to protect the truth, but in this case it was buried, forgotten, and nearly erased. Not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't fit the story that was easier for everyone to believe. And when it finally returned, it didn't scream for justice. It whispered, quietly asking a question that still has no answer. How many other cases are still waiting inside boxes no one wants to open? Some evidence doesn't disappear. It waits. Thanks for watching.